So you've probably thought about this before. How safe is in-person learning during these uncertain times? Well, to understand why these questions surface, we need to first talk about what happened earlier this year. So, as you know, there's a virus going around called COVID-19, causing the entire world to be on lockdown. People are required to stay home as much as possible and wear a mask to protect themselves anywhere else. But what about students? Don't they still need to learn and be educated? Yes, it's called distance learning, and it is what the majority of the schools are currently doing. Basically, classes are taken online through video calls such as Zoom or Google Meet. But after the transmission rates of COVID-19 died down, some schools started to open up again and are doing this half online, half in-person learning called hybrid learning. But from later results, this type of learning is not actually as great as it seems. In this very school, 5 students were infected with COVID during the hybrid schedule. And in this state, the number of infected people continues to rise. According to an epidemiologist's opinions on this problem, he states that the transmission rates are too high. They don't have it under control. According to a case study by Gia Rira and others, they noticed that the transmission of COVID-19 isn't just simple problems like accidentally eating someone else's food or touching something dirty like a doorknob and wiping your eyes. Transmission of the virus is also airborne. By just a small cough, people in a radius could all become infected. With a medical mask for every person, the radius would become smaller, but the risk would stay the same within that area. Additionally, the air circulation in the room affects the virus droplets vastly, and can even reach the corners of the room. In another study by Lieb and others, they noted that in June and July, when community mitigation measures were relaxed in some areas, incidents increased more rapidly, which just means that in certain areas where restrictions lessened, the number of cases increased. This then leads to the solutions to this problem and what could possibly fix it. A suggested answer was to limit the number of people coming back to school, or include less students in the hybrid program. But the problem with that is that when schools attempt hybrid education, which is intended to reduce density in schools in order to allow for social distancing, the system's enormous size presents hurdles almost unimaginable elsewhere, says Shapiro in a New York Times article. Another potential solution would be to prevent large gatherings, for example in lunch lines, picture lines, and break times. But there's another problem that surfaces. It is very difficult to enforce these rules, and when the students do comply, the danger levels stay the same. The CDC, or Centers of Disease Control, posted some guidelines for schools and how they can keep everyone safe. Those guidelines include, number 1, promoting behaviors that reduce COVID-19 spread, number 2, maintaining a healthy environment, number 3, maintaining healthy operations, and number 4, preparing for when someone gets sick. I agree with these guidelines, but the reason why these guidelines don't necessarily improve hybrid learning are that distance learning would just become the simplest solution, which is why I recommend to only return to distance learning. Because schools have already been doing this before and after summer break, this change would be very simple. The previous solutions all required restrictions that would be more effective by just implementing distance learning instead. But until the pandemic is over, the solution would minimize the transmission rates of COVID-19. Students and teachers can advocate for a change by asking schools to change from hybrid learning to distance learning. If we continue with in-person learning, it may result in another influx of cases, such as a resurface of COVID-19 after it disappears. To wrap it all up, hybrid learning is not safe nor effective. Distance learning is the best alternative to this and will protect students and teachers in the best way possible.